Hello and welcome into the Pole Position, your first source for news and information in the world of motorsports. Garth McBain's here alongside Tommy Poole. Tommy, how are you tonight?
Doing pretty well. How about yourself, Garth?
I'm hanging in there. Always good to talk some racing.
It is.
First, we want to remind folks, we haven't done this on previous shows, and I keep forgetting to do it. We do have ways that you can get a hold of us. You can be a part of the show as well. Email us, PolePositionShow@gmail.com. You can go to Facebook, like our page. Just type in facebook.com/PolePositionShow. Or you can tweet at us. My Twitter is gmcmains14. Tommy, do you even have a Twitter?
No, I'm not on Twitter.
Oh, well, you're still living in the dark ages
really
then.
Don't believe in social media.
I don't really either, but I'm a part of the media, so I kind of feel like I have to have a Twitter, unfortunately.
As a young adult in today's society, you have to be on social media at some point, but I have one. It's just I never do it. So it's tpool02, so if you want, I think that's what it is, but if you want to come follow me, go ahead, but I'm not going to be posting anything, so...
Come follow me, though, because I actually use my Twitter, unfortunately. I don't like to use it, but I got it, and I use it, so... Come follow me. You'll get updates on the show, that kind of thing. So, all right, let's get into some NASCAR talk. I'm sure they don't want to hear about our personal lives anymore.
Yours maybe not. I'm a pretty interesting person.
Oh, I see how it is. Mr. I don't use social media.
It's because I have a life.
Oh.
All right. Yeah, so carrying on. We're going to move on here pretty quick.
That was a deep blow. All right, so... let's talk some news in the NASCAR world. First off, Tony Stewart, been in the news for a while, on and off, ebb and flow here. We did get some new news on that that case this week. The district attorney in New York has finished his I'm forgetting the word here, findings. Looking over the case. Investigation. There we go. Thank you, Tommy. Has finished his investigation and has now forwarded the case onto a grand jury. Tommy, what does this mean for Tony Stewart?
It's hard to say right now, and that's what everybody's talking about. What we're all speculating about is just this kind of came out of left field. And, some video evidence came out probably 2-3 weeks after the incident, kind of basically settled everybody's thoughts. Everybody settled down, and then now the sheriffs have come out and said the investigation's over with. They're going to release their findings. They're talking about later this week, so hopefully we're looking at maybe tomorrow or Friday, today being Wednesday. So we'll see with that, but it just kind of came out of left field. I mean, what can you mark him with? But looking at a press release, I've got some good quotes, actually. They said Michael Tantillo, he was the district attorney through the whole thing for Ontario County. He put a quote out to the Washington Post saying, "Upon my review of all the information contained in the entire investigation, I have made the determination that it would be appropriate to submit the evidence to a grand jury for their determination as to what action should be taken in this matter. Accordingly, the evidence developed in the investigation will be presented to an Ontario County grand jury in the near future." This article later goes on to say from The Wire, says the county sheriff finished their investigations last week. The investigators handed over any material and evidence to the district attorney, which included a forensic video enhancement. What do you think that means, Garth?
Well, it's hard to say because at this point, we don't know exactly what they've got for evidence. I mean, we know that video that came out the night of the crash that was put on YouTube that certain media outlets played on loop basically for about 3 days. Other than that, we don't know what they've got. So it's hard to say what they have in terms of evidence to support Tony's case, evidence to hurt Tony's case. We don't know what witnesses they have, if any. And the thing with a grand jury, I was reading into this, a grand jury in New York, Tony cannot be present unless he wants to be in these hearings with the grand jury. he cannot have a lawyer there. He has no representation. And from what I read, it's basically a one-sided thing. Like, Tony can't defend himself if there's any evidence against him in this. So it seems a little odd to me.
Basically, what a grand jury is, under my understanding, and based off what you just said as well, is basically right now they are going to get together and see what and if they can charge Tony Stewart with. And then if they can, then the whole case will go into court, and then he'll be able to be represented by a lawyer.
Right.
But the thing is what really baffles me is, we've went on for 3 weeks, kind of got to the end where we just thought, freak accident. Unfortunately, however, you got to think, they said that it was going to take about 2 weeks to wrap this investigation up, and that's when Tony Stewart returned to action in Atlanta. And about a half week early, by the deadline, they finish after 2 days or so after they got this forensic video enhancement. That just kind of raises my eyebrow and to think, what is this video that they've all of a sudden have wrapped everything up and then now sending it to a grand jury?
But that's the thing, though. This video could be good for Tony and it could be bad for Tony. We don't know. It could be something that definitely shows that maybe Kevin Ward jumped right out in front of him, or it could be something that shows Tony maybe steered toward. We don't know what it is.
But the thing is if it's good for Tony Stewart, why would, one, they not report their findings instantly saying, hey, the investigation's over with? Now, granted, good or bad, they have to announce their findings. But why are they making us wait this extra week? Why are they sending it to a grand jury? That kind of raises my questions into thinking it's something big.
I think more or less because this is such a high-profile case, they want to leave without a doubt that they did a thorough investigation on this. So they're going to send it to the highest place possible, and whatever the grand jury says is final. And I think because this is such a high-profile case, they felt this was necessary just so there was no doubt in anyone's mind that, okay, this is the right decision because they did as much as they could with it.
I agree. It's just I kind of, and it may be me as long as, or as well as all the other members of the media reading into the lines, but hey, that's our job. So, but the thing is just the whole the whole waiting until next week and saying, hey, we know what we're doing, but we're not going to tell you until later next week. And then all of a sudden it surfaces at the beginning of this week, they're sending it to grand jury. So it just kind of adds up in different ways. And then also, with them getting that video saying that that's what caused them to wrap up their investigation so early and that they only
Well,
had
I
it
don't
for
think they
2 days.
said that's what caused them to wrap it up so early.
In the press release that they said that they finished their investigation, they said the investigation is over after police had been handed and then that's when they brought up the video. I couldn't remember word for word, that's why I stopped, but that's basically how it came across. That's how it came across to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's hard to speculate on it because we don't have all the information. We don't have near all the information. So, honestly, I feel like it's almost inappropriate to try and say what is happening here because we really don't know. And I don't know. I feel like it's one of those things where as much as we want to know, it needs to wait until the grand jury releases their findings because it's one of those things where it's one of those ethical things.
No, it definitely is. And I mean, we can sit here and speculate, but we can't. And it's because we don't know. And, nobody knows. You can only see so much in videos, especially at a smaller track like that with a small event occurring. There's only so many cell phone videos. The only and then you want to get into the whole intent thing. The only person who knows what he did is Tony Stewart.
Right.
And if he did something bad, which I highly doubt, but if he did something bad, do you honestly think he is going to come up and say, yeah, I meant to kill this kid?
No.
But the thing is...
Well, there's a fine line there, too. If Tony has enough of a conscience and he did that, he might admit it. But that's the thing. We don't know.
And there's no way that he can. And Kevin Harvick said this in Michigan the race weekend after the incident, and he said anybody who thinks that us race car drivers can go out there and physically turn the wheel into somebody and kill them, he said they're idiots and have never been around a racetrack and don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
And then for Stewart to come back and speak to the public for the first time in Atlanta, that almost took me to tears, and I'm not even the one sitting up there on the stand,
Right.
And I really do think that, my heart really does feel for Tony Stewart, and he's in a bad position, and, it was just kind of a freak accident that it could have happened to anybody, and, unfortunately, he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and, that, unfortunately, that's part of racing, and when you get in like that, accidents like that happen all the time, fighting for the same piece of real estate, and then, Kevin Ward got out of his car. That's normal. And then he started walking down. Stewart didn't overreact, because normally they get as close as possible. The guy who's driving the car stays as close to the intimidating factor, And so they try to do things like that. And then in this particular case, Stewart didn't know how close Ward was going to get. Ward didn't know how high up Stewart was going to go. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you're basically playing Stewart thought that Kevin was going to stop, and Kevin thought Stewart was going to go down low, know? And then that gets into the whole mind-reading factor, and that's just not possible. So as bad as it is, I just feel that it's a racing incident, and it just kind of put Stewart in a bad mark, and he's going to have a black mark over his name for the rest of his career and the rest of his life.
Right. Well, very quickly here, while we're still on our news segment, one other piece of news that came out this week, new sponsors heading over to Joe Gibbs Racing next year, Stanley and DeWalt, leaving Richard Petty Motorsports. They were the two primary sponsors for Marcus Ambrose, or are still for the remainder of the year. Stanley going over to sponsor Carl Edwards next year in his first year with Joe Gibbs Racing. DeWalt going over with Matt Kenseth, returning to Matt Kenseth, whom they sponsored for 11 years in his tenure with Roush Racing from his rookie season in 1999 until 2009 when they left to go over to Richard Petty Motorsports. Now they're back with Matt Kenseth, which I think is kind of cool. I always liked seeing Matt in that DeWalt car.
And it's kind of normal as well for sponsors also. And, kind of coming down to Marcus Ambrose, that was a little of a step down, you can say, for DeWalt. And I think it's the right move. They had an opportunity. I think it's a move that they've been wanting to make. And you see this all the time, that normally sponsors anymore go for a driver or a team. And DeWalt's definitely a sponsor for Kenseth. And then, Kenseth does so well for that sponsor as well. And it's also, why would you want the biggest driver that you can get to promote your products, because they have a bigger fan base, and then the bigger fan base is more likely to mention DeWalt over some other brand of tools. But, so I wouldn't say I saw this one coming, but it makes sense now that they've got the opportunity to come back to Matt Kenseth.
Definitely. Well, that'll do it for our news segment. Stay with us around the break as we will preview this weekend's Camping World Truck Series action as they return to the Magic Mile this weekend in, is it upstate New Hampshire? I can't remember exactly where that track is in New Hampshire.
That will be in our track preview that I cannot tell you. So I've done my research,
so we've got
Garth.
This on lockdown, and
it's just for you. Maybe I'll whisper into the mic a little bit later. So
being seductive over here for the listeners.
That kind of got a little weird. So we probably should head to our break now.
Probably. So we'll take a break here, and when we come back, we will preview.
Only you would think like that, Garth.
You're the one that said whisper into the mic.
I mean, that could have been totally. I was trying to keep a secret from you, and you had to bring up the whole seductive phrase. Come on, man.
All right. Well, we're going to take a break here and be back with the trucks, so stay with us. And welcome back to the Pole Position, your first source for news and information in the world of motorsports. Time to talk the truck race, Tommy. The UNOH 175 coming up on Saturday afternoon from New Hampshire on the 1 mile Magic Mile from Lower New Hampshire, I believe, is what you told me the terminology
it is
was.
Lower New Hampshire, so you're listening to the wrong guy here with Garth. And also,
isn't that the truth?
Also, you're just full of lies this evening.
Am I? What did I lie about this time?
The 1 mile track?
It's called the Magic Mile.
Exactly. That's what everybody thinks. The UNOH 175, normally 175 miles, correct?
I'm going to guess
Wrong.
no.
It's 185.15 mile. That would be the total length, and it is because New Hampshire Motor Speedway. It is 1.058 miles in length. It is an oval, kind of like Martinsville a little bit, just a little bit bigger, higher speeds than Martinsville. It opened in June 5th of 1990, has seen a lot of big series at this track, including the NASCAR Sprint Cup, the Camping World Truck Series, Nationwide Series, as well as the IndyCar Series. And it also has a road course built into it that I did not know of this. That has played host to the Skip Barber Series, as well as some motorcycles as well. Now, for the track, it is a 1.058 mile in length. It has turns with degree banking of 2 to 7 degrees.
Variable banking.
Variable, yes, is what it is called. That 2 degree is at the bottom and 7 at the top, and then it goes on up through the middle of the track. And the straightaways are 1 degree banking both the front and back. So there's your track preview for Lower New Hampshire, New Hampshire Motor Speedway.
Thank you, Tommy. Always very informative over here.
Sure is.
I don't even know what he just said, but we'll keep going.
I said it sure is. It always is. You learn a lot from me, folks.
It's not what I thought you said, but we'll keep going here. As I said, trucks first time back there in 3 years. Their last race of the track was 2011. 2012 they left, went to Kentucky for a companion weekend with the Nationwide Series to give Kentucky another big weekend on top of their Cup weekend, so they had 2 big weekends a year. They changed that last year and put ARCA with Nationwide at Kentucky, and trucks just had an off weekend last year on that weekend. Now they're back in New Hampshire this weekend, and should be an exciting race this weekend. I can't say, though, looking back through the history, or the recent history of the trucks being there, that it was all too exciting before they left. Kyle Busch has won the last 3 truck races at the track, the last 2 of those coming from the pole. So, typical Kyle Busch in the truck series. For those of you like Tommy that don't like to see Cup drivers in the Nationwide and Truck Series, thankfully for you, Kyle Busch is not in the truck race this weekend. Eric Jones is driving that 51 truck. Let's look, though, at our championship contenders coming into this weekend. They're passed at New Hampshire. Ryan Blaney, our third-place guy in points, it's his first start at the track, so can't really talk about his history since he doesn't have a history yet. But we'll look at Matt Crafton and Johnny Sauter, your main 2 guys in the points right now, separated by 5 points. Crafton taking the points lead last week in Chicago from Sauter. Both of them have a fairly decent record at the track. Sauter has a little bit better of a record with 2 fifth-place finishes and a 7th in his 3 starts, so all top 10 finishes and 2 top 5s for him. Crafton, though, has done pretty well. He's got 10 starts in New Hampshire, 6 of those being top 10s, and his only finish outside the top 13 was in 2005 when he was caught up in a wreck and finished 35th. So, Tommy, interesting race coming up this weekend. How do you think the trucks are going to fare in their first time back in New Hampshire in 3 years?
I think they'll do well. They normally did. They were fun to watch when they were running prior to 2011. And I think they'll do decent running back. it's kind of a flip of the roles here, flips the script a little bit. Normally, we see the nationwide cars traveling with the Cup Series, and then if all three of them, if one of them split, then it's normally the trucks going elsewhere. Garth, do you think that plays a role in affecting the Cup cars as well with tire compound?
If anything, I think it helps them because you always hear them talking about how, especially for the Cup guys, they like being later in the weekend after there's been a little bit of on-track activity and they put some rubber down on the track. So I think, if anything, it helps the Cup guys having the trucks on the track, getting a little more rubber down, as long as it doesn't rain. But from what I hear, the forecast in New Hampshire is looking really nice for this weekend, so I don't think they have to worry about that. But no, I think if anything, it helps them.
Do you think that it makes a difference that they're with the trucks this weekend and not the nationwide? Do you think that that plays a role in the different tire compounds that's put on the track as well?
Elaborate a little more. I'm not sure exactly what you're asking with that.
Like, do you think that with the trucks, the rubber that the trucks lay down, do you think that is different than nationwide, and would that affect the trucks or the Cup guys on Sunday?
Not as far as I can tell. Are you looking for a specific answer here? Do you know something that I don't?
I don't. I was just asking your opinion if you knew, because I know in IndyCar, and I keep bringing that up because that's my home series, kind of like NASCAR is yours. But the Indy Lights cars, as well as the Road to Mazda, Road to Indy series, they're all sponsored by Cooper tires. So then they run Cooper tires instead of Firestone Indy Lights, and I know that the Izod guys kind of hate that. They do like the extra grip, but they don't because they are different tire compounds. So I just didn't know, especially with maybe the weights being different as well in the trucks, if it kind of puts off a different size, if there was any science to the matter, or if it was just, typical media looking in between the lines a little more.
Well, I think the good thing with that is, in terms of NASCAR, all three major series have Goodyear tires. So I think Goodyear tries to balance those things out and try to keep it pretty even like that. The trucks do run Goodyear Wranglers instead of Goodyear Eagles, like what's on the Cup and Nationwide. But no, I think Goodyear tries to keep that pretty even and try to keep problems like that from happening. Doesn't always work that way. I mean, as we've seen, Goodyear can bring some pretty bad tire combinations to some tracks, but generally they do pretty good with what they bring.
With that aside, the trucks are in New Hampshire, and that is going to heat up the championship battle just a little bit better. Matt Crafton leads his teammate Johnny Sauter by 5 points, and then they lead Ryan Blaney by 16, who leads Darrell Wallace by 36. Actually, Matt Crafton leads Wallace by 36. So it's almost a 4-truck race. Do you agree with that, or do you think it's only a 3?
I'm not going to count Bubba Wallace out yet. Bubba Wallace has been steadily chipping away at that lead lately. He's had some fantastic finishes lately. I'm not going to count him out until he's officially mathematically out, because he's had some fantastic runs lately. And honestly, I think he could catch up and put himself firmly in this championship battle by the end of the season. As much as he's been catching up and as good of a season as he has had of late, I would not put it past him to somehow sneak his way into this championship talk and possibly win it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Winning may be a little out of the reach. I do expect him to pull closer. But, man, I'm just excited to watch these trucks get in action. Especially, I want to see what happens later on down the road with Thor Motorsports. ThorSport, sorry. And I really am looking forward to that, with the two teammates they're 5 points off right now, and just kind of seeing if there's any team orders thrown in the ranks, or what happens going on down the road, and just just good hard racing, and that's what the fans like, and that's good for the sport, and it's always fun to watch.
Well, that's the good thing I think about NASCAR is, with things like that, you really don't get team orders in that kind of situation for most teams. I mean, some teams might try to work something out there. But, I mean, you've got two teammates. I mean, as long as you race each other clean, you know, you do what you can for each other. You don't really I don't know that you help each other as much as you would normally, but you definitely don't try to hurt each other. It was funny. I heard Steve Letarte earlier this week, Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s crew chief, talking about does coming down into a stretch run in a championship like this, do you help your teammates more or less, especially in a situation like he's in where his two teammates are probably two of his closest competitors for the championship. And he explained it in an interesting way. I'd never heard this before. But basically, all your team notes and everything for a big team like that now, you just stick them straight into a database. And they're available for the entire team no matter what. So basically, if you try not to share anything with everybody else, you're hurting yourself more than you're helping yourself. So it's kind of interesting to hear that side of it because I'm not sure I'd ever heard that before.
And I think that as a team in this position right now for ThorSport, they need to keep them together as much as they can right now.
Mm-hmm.
Don't start going for anything earth-shattering. Just bring the trucks home in one piece, finish as high in the standings as you can, and then wrap her up in the truck and bring her out the next weekend. Once you get about 2, maybe 3 races to go, then if you crash it, you crash it. For Johnny Sauter, of course. But right now, I would just, for the two of them, I would still be working as teammates.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just for Johnny Sauter, keep going as hard as he can. Of course, he'd like to lead Kraft into the line a few times. That would also, 5 points is 2-3 positions.
Mm-hmm.
So, that'll be very interesting to see how they go about that. But right now, you just want to keep running with each other. Still act as teammates, I would. And then, the worst-case scenario, or the best thing that can happen from that is, you'll pad your lead to Ryan Blaney and then make it a 2-truck race, and then you two can go for it.
Right. Well, final 3 minutes here of our truck talk. So, Tommy, what's your prediction for the UNOH 175? Who do you think is going to pull out a win this weekend in the trucks?
I'm going to pick Eric Jones. Eric Jones is fast. He's good. We talked about him last show. It's kind of unfortunate that he's not been racing all season because of his age. But it will be interesting to see what he can do. He's always fast in that Kyle Busch truck. He drives Kyle Busch's truck, the one that Kyle's in when Kyle does the driving for it. So be interesting, and of course, his teammates Darrell Wallace Jr. So Bubble always has the truck set up good, and then of course those are teammates. So I think if Bubba can't get the job done, I think watch for Eric Jones.
I'm going to go for an interesting pick here, and I don't think you're going to see this one coming. I'm going to go with Herman Quiroga. He's been really good lately, especially since that great run he had in Canada where he almost won, got barely beaten out by Ryan Blaney. I think he's still got that drive in him, and I think he's going to get a win before the end of the season, and I think it's going to be sooner rather than later. He's hitting on all cylinders right now, and honestly, I never thought I would say this, but he is the best truck at Red Horse right now. He is better than Timothy Peters right now, which I didn't think I'd ever say because Timothy Peters has always been the flagship of that team, but he's been kind of falling off lately. Herman's been getting better. And Herman, if he keeps running like this and he runs in the trucks next year, I could see him being a championship contender next year, which would be great to see. I like Herman. He's got a great personality. He's a great driver. So it'd be great to see him continue to run like this. And I think he's got it in him to win this weekend.
If he wins at an oval, I think this would be the one that he gets it at because, this isn't your typical oval. This is an oval that you do have to let out and you do have to break in the corners. So then therefore it kind of gives the road course people it levels the playing field out for them a little bit, if you will. So I think if he's going to get a win at the oval, this would be the one. So even though he is more of a road course driver, I think you shouldn't count him out for here. And he also has He's got 3 top 5s this season, so he really doesn't burn up the top 5s, but he's got 9 top 10s. So if he can't get the job done, I look for him in at least the top 10 area.
Definitely. Well, that'll do it for our truck preview for this weekend. Stick with us around the corner, and we'll preview this weekend's nationwide action from Kentucky, the visitmyrtlebeach.com 300. Stick with us. This is the Pole Position. And welcome back to the Pole Position, your first source for news and information in the world of motorsports. Kentucky this weekend, their second weekend of action for NASCAR. Doubleheader weekend with ARCA and Nationwide. Nationwide obviously being the headliner for that, the visitmyrtlebeach.com 300. Nationwide's been there since 01. Tommy, you are chomping at the bit here to do a track profile, so why don't I let you do that?
Kentucky Speedway is in Sparta, Kentucky. That is towards...
Not Whitesville.
No, it is not. That is towards the Virginia area, kind of east...
Is
yes,
it that
that's
far
eastern
east?
Kentucky. Yeah, it is.
Oh, okay.
It's northeast Kentucky.
Oh.
It is a 1.5 mile track with 14 degrees bankings in the turns. The straightaway are 4 degrees apiece, and the tri-oval is 8 to 10 degree banking. So there is your preview for the 1.5 mile Kentucky Speedway.
Well, thank you for that, Tommy. Always very enlightening track profiles from you. We're always happy to hear those. So,
What I do, Garth. What I do.
well, thank you. Now we can see why you ace all your classes. You do the studying.
We can go for that.
Yeah. So, let's talk about the race itself this weekend, not just the track. Ryan Blaney, the defending winner of this race. Kevin Harvick won back in the spring. And if I'm not mistaken, I have not gotten the computer to work fast enough to pull up the entry list yet. But if I'm not mistaken, neither one of them will be in this race because they will both be in New Hampshire. Blaney for the trucks and Harvick for the Cup Series. Let's make sure here. And yes. Oh, that is something that I wanted to bring up, actually, and I'm glad I noticed that here on the entry list. The 22 car for Penske this weekend. Don't look at the entry list. Who do you think is going to be in that car?
That brings up a good point.
Because think about who is normally in that car and where they will be this
Ryan
weekend.
Blaney.
Yeah.
It's a good one. I don't have anything for you.
I would have never figured this before I saw the announcement earlier today. Michael McDowell is in that car this weekend, which I thought was interesting because it seems like he's more of a Gibbs driver. So, because whenever he runs nationwide races, I know he runs for the Levine family team in the Cup Series, that 95 car. When he runs nationwide races, though, he runs for Gibbs. So I thought that was kind of an interesting decision, and I'm wondering how that came together.
Yeah, me too, because the only guy I would have really guessed was Sam Hornish Jr., but
he's with Gibbs,
yeah, so he's
That's
running
the same
Bush's
thing, though.
car. Right, so... Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, but that's kind of how racing is nowadays. Is they're with whoever they can get. IndyCar had Juan Pablo Montoya. Penske got him a couple years ago in 2012. Yeah, was it 12 or it was 2013. Penske released. Ryan Briscoe and brought in A.J. Allmendinger from NASCAR, brought him up, and Ganassi picked up Briscoe. Now Briscoe runs full-time for Ganassi this season. So,
now Allmendinger's back in NASCAR and Montoya's in IndyCar.
Correct. And then see the same thing happen there as Penske picked up one of Ganassi's drivers. So, that maybe it's kind of get back at the team for doing so, or But that's the thing. As a driver, you can't sit there and be so loyal to a team.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to pay the bills as well, and
Right.
you can't be sitting there waiting on a big organization like Penske or Gibbs Motorsports to find a spot for you. If you get an offer, you got to take it.
Right. And I mean that's the other thing too is I don't not like the decision to put Michael McDowell in there. McDowell's a good driver, and I've always thought if he had the right equipment, he could do pretty good. He always runs really well in these nationwide races when he's in this good equipment for Gibbs, or now we'll see what he does with Penske equipment, because like we've said before, that 22 car week in, week out is the best car in nationwide, more or less. So it'd be interesting to see what he can do in that car. But that's the thing, though. We were talking about who's in that car. Who else are you going to put in there in terms of who's been in there? I mean, everyone else is preoccupied somewhere else. So I guess if Penske's going to put the car on the track, they've got to look somewhere, and Michael McDowell was the place to look. But for those of you like Tommy over here that don't like to see Cup guys in nationwide cars, as Tommy is looking at me like, why are you throwing me under the bus like this? I'm making a point, Tommy. It's a good point. This is your race. If I'm not mistaken, there's not a single Cup driver in this race, unless you want to consider Michael McDowell a Cup driver. But, I mean, he runs for a very underfunded team in the Cup Series, doesn't really run up near the front. Tommy's pointing at J.J. Yaley right now, and he doesn't run every week in the Cup Series.
Well, my point with that, and I was going to point at Sam Hornish Jr. as well, but
he doesn't run in Cup
Well, no,
anymore.
he doesn't. That's my point. Is they're not, and I'm okay with this. And before you threw me under the bus, the more I hear it, the more I'm okay with it. But yeah, so Michael McDowell, J.J. Yaley, the people who have been in there, and then not so much. They kind of dabble in it if they can get past the starting park cars. So I wouldn't qualify him as a NASCAR caliber driver just because of his experience level right now at the moment. But yeah, he's a good driver as well, and it's a good spot for him. It will be a really interesting race, and the top 5 in points right now have got to be grinning from ear to ear because here's their chance. Although just like every other race with the Cup drivers not being able to get any points, but this is really their chance to kind of show it, and they're being the headliners of the field.
This is their chance to maximize points, because when the Cup drivers are in there, they still get points for whatever position they're in. Just whatever position the Cup drivers finish in, those points don't get given out. So, yeah, like you said, they can maximize their points now. If they win the race, this is probably one of their few chances to actually get those 48 points for winning.
Right, and it's also gonna kind of help with I'm expecting a close race just like last week in Chicagoland, because last weekend they all finished right behind each other. All 5 of them finished right behind each other. So I'm expecting another tight one like that. And, tight racing is always fun to watch, and it's even more fun when those who are in the tight battle are in a tight battle for the championship as well.
Now let's look at the top 3 in the championship right now, what they have done at Kentucky in the past. Chase Elliott obviously only has 1 start at Kentucky, that being the race earlier this season back in June, and he finished 12th in that race. Not a bad finish, not a spectacular finish, not, I think, what we have come to expect out of Chase Elliott, but, I mean, you got to remember, too, it's his rookie season, so he's not going to be spectacular in every race either. But a very good finish for him, and it's his second time around at the track, and we've seen what he's done at tracks in his first time around, so I would not count him out as a possibility to win this weekend.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. He's always strong, and as you said, he's not the Chase Elliott that we expected this time in the spring. But I really think that he's got what it takes. He's a definite championship contender, and another teammate fight for the championship with Regan Smith, and it'll be interesting as well.
And this is also looking at Regan Smith's past history at Kentucky, I think this is a chance for Chase Elliott to extend that points lead. Regan Smith does not have a good history at this track. His best finish is 12th in this fall race last year. Other than that, that's his only top 15 finish at Kentucky. So he's going to have to really step up his game if he doesn't want Chase to really pull away from him this weekend. Then you've got Ty Dillon, also a rookie, along with Chase Elliott. So he's only got one start in the Nationwide Series at this track. That was back in June. He finished 7th. So he finished better than Chase did back in the spring. And he also won the truck race here last year. So he knows how to win at this track. And I would not put it past him to win his second race of the year here.
I also want to bring up the point, too, about Chase Elliott finishing 12th in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
We can't shine too much light on that because looking at the results, Brendan Gong finished 6th, and he was the first nationwide regular and the only one who will be competing this weekend to finish. He was the first one to finish out of those guys, and he finished 6th. And then you had Ty Dillon 7th, Brian Scott 8th, and then you had another NASCAR regular, Kyle Larson, who will not be there in 9th, and then Elliott Sadler, Dylan Kwasniewski, and then Chase Elliott. So, you really can't shine too much light on that. So if you want to say that, he was about 4th, 5th. So that's about where he finished in Chicagoland, and, that would be a good solid day for him. As long as he brings him home and keeps him in the top 10, I think it's going to be really hard for Regan Smith to catch him and pull away.
Well, especially with Regan Smith's past history, too. I mean, as long as Elliott gets a top 10, Regan's really going to have to step up his game at this track because he's not been good here. I mean, looking at the numbers, he's going to have to really step it up. Otherwise, Chase is going to extend this lead by 10 or 15 points in one race and going to make it really hard going down the stretch here.
Yeah, in the spring, Regan was 28th, and he was running.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't really problem. It's just he's just not strong at this track, and that happens in racing. You're strong at specific tracks, and then you're not. And this might break his season maybe.
All right, prediction time. We're down to the final 3 minutes here of the segment to talk about Kentucky. Tommy, all nationwide drivers basically this weekend in this race. Obviously, some of them, it's their best chance of the year to get a win. Who do you think possibly could eke that out? Is it somebody that we've seen win already, or do you think it's going to be somebody new that has not been in victory lane in the Nationwide Series this year?
I am thinking it is going to be a 2-time winner this season, that being the number 62 car of Brendan Gong. I really think he is going to be...
1-time winner.
I think that he's going to make it 2.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Okay.
I'm not that stupid.
I'm looking at this going.
But no, I think he's really going to... he's my favorite, kind of a little bit of a dark horse, but I've seen Brendan in action for... ever since 2009 or so, and been impressed with him. Not really a front runner or a dominator, but he has what it takes to run up there with the big boys, and I made mention of him finishing 6th in the spring as the first nationwide regular to finish, and he's decent at this track, and I really think that he can get the win here.
Well, before I make my pick, I want to shine a light on someone else here as I'm looking down through the entry list, someone that I didn't notice the first time through that's actually making, believe it's his first nationwide start this weekend. 20 car for Joe Gibbs Racing, Justin Boston, someone that's been very good in the ARCA series, making his way into the nationwide series. Obviously, Gibbs needed somebody to put in that 20 car, so you put a guy like Justin Boston, who from what I hear, I really honestly have not paid that much attention to what he has done, but from what I hear, he's a very good driver coming up and could very well have a good run and put himself maybe in a position to get a full-time ride next year. It'd be nice to see. My pick, though, for this weekend, I think I'm going to go out on a limb a little bit here, and I think I'm going to surprise you a little bit with this one, too. I'm going to go with Michael McDowell. That 22 car, as we said, has been strong. He wants to prove himself. I think that 22 car goes to victory lane again, but with a new face, that being Michael McDowell.
I can see that happening. That'll be a close one. Justin Boston, he's a good driver. I've got his stats right here in front of me. 2 years in the ARCA series and 1 year in the K&N. And in the ARCA, his average finish for the 2 years was 10th. So, he can be a good addition, and that's what I like seeing when they don't have the NASCAR stars dominating them, is you get to see these young stars step up.
Definitely. Well, that'll do it for our Kentucky preview for this weekend for the Nationwide Series, the VisitMyrtleBeach.com 300. Stay with us around the corner. We'll talk about the Sprint Cup Series Sylvania 300 this weekend, round number 2 of the chase for the Sprint Cup in New Hampshire. And welcome back to the Pole Position, your first source for news and information in the world of motorsports. Tommy, we've talked trucks, we've talked Nationwide, we've even talked Tony Stewart. Like that horse hasn't been beat to death at this point. Time to talk the Cup Series, though. The Sylvania 300, round number 2 of the chase this weekend. Round number 1 was exciting last week. Do you think this week is going to be just as exciting?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The wild card factor for the chase. It's alive. It's here. We're ready to go. And it's great because there's no off week.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have an off week. You got to be going. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be tight racing like we saw in Chicagoland, so I'm excited.
Well, here's an interesting stat that I saw before we came onto the show. There have been 13 different winners in a row at New Hampshire so far, or at this moment. If one of 3 chase drivers wins this race on Sunday, they will make it 14, and that will break a record because New Hampshire is currently tied with Texas for that record of 13. If they make it 14, New Hampshire will hold that record. Those 3 chase drivers are Jeff Gordon, Kevin Harvick, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. They're the 3 with the best chance to win and keep that record going. Do you see one of those 3 being able to win on Sunday?
I can see them doing it, yes, based off their season and whatnot and how they've done. Ran real well, all 3 of them. I mean, all 3 of them are, in my opinion, one of the championship contenders. At the start of the chase and at the start of the year, I had either Gordon or Junior being my chase champion, but after the last couple weeks, I'm kind of switched to the Keselowski bandwagon. He's just dominating. And who won here in the fall? Brad Keselowski. So it'll be interesting.
You mean the summer? First
Spring.
race this year?
Yeah. Sorry. Not the fall, my fault.
Yeah.
This is the fall.
Yeah.
So I am a mind reader again. I did.
You're out of it tonight.
I did get the winner last week in Chicagoland. My man Brad K. Yes, I did.
Was that who you picked on the show? Because you picked somebody different on the show than you had on your bracket.
Well, I picked Brad K. for the Chicago race on my bracket.
Who'd you pick on the show last week? I should have gone back and looked at that. Because I stuck with Harvick, who I had on my bracket.
That's a good question. I can't remember who I did, but that doesn't matter. What matters is what's written on paper.
Yeah.
So,
you got it recorded, though.
Yeah, paper's better. I'm old school.
Yeah.
Don't do social media. Remember we touched base on that earlier in the show. So, yeah, Brad K., I think he's going to dominate everything, but Gordon, Harvick, and Junior, who could set a record this weekend by winning, as you mentioned, I really do think that they have just as good of a shot as anybody. So, however, they really didn't fare too well here in the summer race. Either of those drivers did not. I think Jeff Gordon, he finished back in the pack about 26th is where he finished. And then it's just kind of hodgepodge from there. Chase drivers really didn't do much. Earnhardt Jr. was probably the best of the 3, and he finished 10th. And then besides Brad winning and Kyle Busch came in second, he's kind of a dark horse through the chase. Larson finished third. He's not in the chase. Kenseth, Newman were fourth and fifth. And then you go Boyer, Stewart, and then you go to Hamlin. He's another dark horse. So, the big names really weren't a big story here in the summer. Jimmy Johnson, who everybody thinks, well, I shouldn't say everybody thinks, it's proven that he is a championship driver, and he comes alive in the chase. And he finished 42nd due to an accident. So, you don't have to tell the 48 camp that it's go time because they are very aware of it. And it'll also be interesting to see what they can muster.
But that's the thing with the 48, though. They were good last week at Chicago, but they weren't great like we've seen them before. Are they really in championship mode right now, or do we need to be worried? I mean, we've been talking about this for weeks. I mean, we've said that they do this every year and that they kind of limp into the chase, kind of testing things, and then all of a sudden they get into the chase and a light switch flips, and all of a sudden they're winning half the races in the chase and on their way to another championship. I don't see that this year. I don't see that same team in the 48 camp this year. They're good, but at this point, I'm not even sure. I've got him in my Final Four, but I'm not even sure he can make the Final Four.
Everybody said that last year, though, too, closing into the end of the season.
But we're in the chase right now, and he's still not doing that.
Here's my point, and if they do this, it's kind of risky, but you got to think who we're talking about. We're talking about Chad Canales and Jimmy Johnson. With this new chase format, they could be just sitting there not showing all their cards. Like, take it for a race example. Kyle Busch, as we stated earlier in the week on our recap show, that he showed all his cards right out of the gate. And he was dominating, and then he forced people to make changes, and he ended up getting beat. So now, with this new format, it's not balls to the walls all the time. It could be kind of a strategy game maybe. And so what they're doing is they're just kind of making an endurance race here. And, you're looking at me kind of funny, but I think now that I think about it a little more, it could be a good call. They could be, because they are a 48 team. You said they ran good last weekend, but not for a 48 car. They're consistent. And that's what's going to get you into the first and get you past the first and second round cut. But if you want to contend for the 4-car championship, you've got to win a race, and you've got to be on top of your game, and you don't have to tell Jimmy Johnson and Chad Canales how to be on top of their game. They are a standing example for everybody in the series. So, they are looking a little uncharacteristic, but they do this every year. Now, it's a little later than normal, but is this planned?
It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, Chad and Jimmy seem to be just the masters of figuring out chase formats and being able to dominate them. And, I mean, you might be right. It would not surprise me in the slightest. Let's look at the race as a whole right now, and let's just go straight into our predictions right now. Tommy, will a chase driver win on Sunday and advance themselves to the next round like Brad did last week, or could we see a non-chase driver win this week?
I'm going to say nobody will advance with a win here, but I'm not saying that a non-chase driver is going to win.
So you're saying Brad Keselowski's going to win?
I think Brad's going to do it again. I mean, now scold me for jumping on the bandwagon, but he is strong. And I mean, no matter what anything throws to him, and this is the same thing Jimmy Johnson this year in Pocono or in Michigan when he had to fix his own gear shifter. In the car, onboard camera shows him working with pliers and wrenches in the car himself, and he still mustered a top 10 finish. When you're on top of your game, you're on top of your game. Somebody can go, the entire field can try to put you in the wall, and you're still going to come back and manage a top finish. They called him in last week in Chicagoland for a wobbly tire. Crew chief apologized, said, "Hey, I'm sorry, we had to pull you in. We're in the lead. I'm sorry, you've worked your way up here. This may have cost us the day, but we're in the chase. We've got to be thinking, staying safe and just bringing it home up top instead of trying to go for the win and a big problem coming." And then he ends up winning the race. When you're on top of your game, you're on top of your game, and nothing can stop you, and that's how Brad Keselowski in the deuce is right now.
Well, Tommy makes a very good argument for Brad Keselowski this week. I can see Brad winning this week. Brad's been good at New Hampshire, as he said. He won back in July. I'm going to go in a different direction, though. I'm going to stay true to my chase grid here and stick with a guy that has been good at New Hampshire, that being Ryan Newman. He finished 5th in July. He has been fantastic at this track in the past. He needs a rebound after last week. He's sitting 13th in points right now. He is below that cutoff right now and needs a little bit of a rebound. I think Ryan Newman gets the job done, gets his first win of the year, and puts himself into the next round. And I'm sticking with my chase grid on this one.
Yeah, I hear you. He's one position behind Edwards. He's currently sitting 13th. He's 1 point off Edwards.
Mm-hmm.
However, he doesn't just need 1 point, because I really do think that number is up for grabs, and I really don't think Edwards is safe. And then, Casey Kane's only 4 points ahead of him.
Mm-hmm.
And, we have only got one race, but the thing is after this weekend, we've only got one more. So, you can't be saying, yeah, look at the long term, it'll stretch it out more, and that's the beauty of this new chase format, is it's going to keep it tight, and it's going to keep it, people are only going to be missing by a point, a position
Mm-hmm.
or two, so it'll be interesting to see what that leads to here as we continue to progress through this new chase format. So far, I haven't seen a thing to dislike about it.
I haven't either. And you mentioned how close Ryan Newman is to Carl Edwards and Casey Kane. That whole group right there is so close. Ryan Newman is only 12 points behind Jimmy Johnson in 8th. So you've got a very tight pack there, and it's only 20 points, Jimmy Johnson in 8th, to Greg Biffle in 15th. So you've got a very tight-knit group here that could easily shift and sway in the next couple races. And honestly, I don't think anyone's safe right now, other than Keselowski, obviously, because he won. I think Gordon, Logano, and Harvick are probably safe because they're within 12 points of each other in the top 4. But then you drop back to Earnhardt, who's 17 points back, and he's actually only a point above Jimmy Johnson, and he's in 5th. So you got Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch tied with Jimmy Johnson for 6th. You get a very close battle here. I don't think there's very many people that are safe right now, and I don't know that the bottom 4, you can really say these 4 are definitively going to be out after Dover, because it could change so much. You could have something happen like with Eric Almirola last week, running 6th, blowing engine. All of a sudden, you need a Hail Mary to get into the next round. So I don't know. That's an interesting, very close group there. Got a couple of notes here just before we get done here. New Hampshire, I heard earlier today, the promoter of New Hampshire was on an interview earlier today. He was talking about wanting a night race for the July race. And he said this because ticket sales are a little bit better for the chase race, obviously, because it's a chase race. And the July race, there's not really much that goes on there. They tried to push for a night race on next year's schedule, and NASCAR and NBC, who was the TV partner starting next year for that stretch of races, didn't want it because that would make 3 night races in a row with Daytona and Kentucky. But they're still pushing for this. I would like to see a night race at New Hampshire in the future.
I do too, and that's kind of a trend in NASCAR too on their schedule, is the tracks that they do go to twice, they run a day and a night race normally. Now there's some that are not like that, but very few. Like Martinsville doesn't run that, I believe, right? They used to? Did they not? Or am I getting
Martinsville doesn't have lights at all.
Really?
Nope.
Okay, I thought maybe I'm getting them mixed up with Bristol then.
Richmond used to run a day race, and now both of theirs are at night. So maybe that's what you're thinking of.
That might be. But anyway, so that'll be interesting. And it's also a lot of tracks that are feeling that they're not meeting their numbers. I know it was in talk that Indy was going to get lights to bring NASCAR at night. And also, the race is in July, so dead heat. If it's not 100% action-packed racing, that kind of turns fans away as well. So it'll be interesting. I'm for it. I'm always for night races. I think they're fantastic. Other than the fact of starting really late on West Coast races, hence IndyCar Championship started at like 10:30. But so besides that, the cars always look so cool under the lights too. So that's always fun as well.
Well, we're pushing the time limit a little here, but there is one more thing I want to talk about before we wrap the show up here. So we are going to go a little bit extra time here. 9-car next season. Marcus Ambrose leaving, as we talked about on the recap show for Chicago. Tommy, who do you think is the best option to put in that car next year?
I've got nothing. I mean, I honestly don't know. They'll find somebody. Landon Castle maybe. Michael McDowell maybe. I mean, just any one of those who has been there, done that kind of cars or drivers. Who knows? It'll be interesting.
Well, I think they need somebody to pick that team up that's been with a good team in the past. And honestly, I think they're going to stick with the Ford camp. I think that would be in their best interest. And I think, looking at whose contracts are up next year, which would be the most likely scenarios, obviously contracts can be bought out and stuff, but in terms of who will be a free agent at the end of the season, I think David Reagan is probably the best option for that ride. His contract's up with Front Row at the end of the season, as is David Gilliland. So David Gilliland could slide into that as well. But I think David Reagan is the better option. He's been with Roush, had a little bit of success with Roush, not enough, and kind of got shooed out of there, pushed down to Front Row Motorsports, has won a race with Front Row Motorsports, has run decent in races in a team that's not well funded, and I think, honestly, he's probably the best option for that car next year.
I still wouldn't count out Corey LaJoie. Yes, that's rushing him, but, I mean, for a press release to say that they stated that he is a Richard Petty Motorsports developmental driver, yet he's not racing for them this weekend. So for them to throw that in, that kind of raises questions as well. And he was announced to drive here in New Hampshire this weekend right after the news broke that Ambrose was going over to Australia for the V8 Supercars. So are they rushing it? Maybe, but, the old saying goes sink or swim. And at this point, what do they have to lose, really?
Exactly. I mean, I wouldn't rule it out. You bring up some good points on that. So we'll have to see what happens with that in the future. That'll about do it for us this week on our preview show for New Hampshire. Thank you to Tommy, as always, for joining me. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And don't forget, you can email us questions, polepositionshow@gmail.com. Like us on Facebook, facebook.com/polepositionshow. Or you can tweet at me with questions and comments at gmcmains14 on Twitter. Tommy says he's got a Twitter, but he doesn't use it, so he's kind of out there in the dark ages. So if you're on Twitter, in the Twitter world, and you want to tweet at me at gmcmains14. So, and it'll be in the description of the show on YouTube as well. So you'll see how to spell it on there. So that'll about do it for us tonight. And so be sure to check in on Monday for our recap of New Hampshire. Have a great weekend, guys.